So, I'm gonna try and speed through this one, fighting gamers, because there's a lot to talk about. But I'm gonna try and condense it as much as I can. I'm gonna bullet point as much as I possibly could on screen for extra legibility for you guys. But character strength is essentially decided by a cross between three things: strength of archetype and win condition, damage consistency, and safety. I'm going to try and go through them all in a good amount of depth without being overwhelming, but still keeping the explanation meaningful and understandable for you at home. So first, let's look at strength of archetype. While those who watch my other series, Archetype Archive, might not have gotten the impression, there actually is an archetype tier list, and for the most part it's pretty concrete. To demonstrate this, I want to go over what is maybe one of the most excruciating fighting game matches that I've watched in my life: Daigo vs Kawano. For some added context, not only is Daigo maybe the single most celebrated fighting game player of all time, but this match at this point in the evening was 15 minutes after Street Fighter 6 was supposed to be unveiled, so we had to sit through this set to watch Street Fighter 6 be announced. Daigo is playing Guile, a charge character. Not only are charge characters very good on the archetype tier list, probably something around A tier, but Guile is very good in this game too. And Daigo is a great Guile. Unfortunately for him, Kawano is not only a great Colin, but he is the best Colin, and Colin is the best. Guile's game plan here is to look for consistent, guaranteed damage. Combos are dangerous to fish for, but if Daigo ever lands one, it will be explosive. But besides that, it's mostly just cheap damage that Daigo's looking for. Throws, spinning back kick, windmill kick, and of course flash kick, all to snuff out approaches and shimmies from Colin. Basically, Daigo's playing Guile in order to nudge Colin out of his personal space and give him room to then confuse and surprise his opponent during her approaches. And hopefully amidst all of that, he'll create room for these explosive combos I was just talking about. As a charge character, Guile's strongest at preventing approach. All he has to do is hold down back, hit up and kick, and then fling Kawano away. Kawano's game plan as Colin though is to do 30% of Daigo's HP just by doing quarter circle forward EX ice punch. See, Colin is a footsies character, a term I don't really like because I don't think it easily lets a beginner know what these guys actually do. In actuality, Colin's something like a Punisher. Literally the only thing she has to do is punish a whiffed attack. These characters do not ever bother going on the offensive, even against a defensive character like Guile. She's just looking to use her high movement speed to walk back and forth in and out of Daigo's range, and shimmy just past his attacks and explode him for it. This, I think, is one of the best encapsulations that I can find for all 3 points of what makes a character top tier. Colin is almost always safe, as she doesn't intend to act unless a player has visual confirmation that damage is guaranteed in response to a whiffed attack. Her damage is both guaranteed, consistent, and extremely high, and that was the main thing they nerfed to knock her out of a definitive top 1 spot after this tournament, as well as her becoming pretty unsafe if blocked too. Although that was mostly true at this point in time anyway, and ultimately somewhat wound up irrelevant to the way this match was played, since Kawano would rarely do anything Daigo could even theoretically block, making her safe even if her frame data wasn't, by right of how her game plan works. If it wasn't clear by how I was talking, Kawano wound up winning this match. It was a hard fought game from Daigo, but it couldn't win out against Colin's extremely strong and, honestly, somewhat easier than Guile's game plan. So I think that goes well to show that in order to make a top tier character for some reason, or if you're wanting to look at a balanced character in general, a character must be designed in an equilibrium of all 3 points. Colin was effectively sunset out of Street Fighter V competition just from having point 2 and 3 heavily nerfed, when for Archetype, I think these Punisher characters are the definitive strongest archetype. And by the way, just for a little bit of trivia, playing this game plan improperly is what lost Justin Wong the infamous Evo 37 moment. All he had to do was use Chun-Li's full screen punish for anything move in response to Daigo using literally anything, but he got greedy and assumed, since it's extremely difficult and wasn't even known to be possible at this time, that Daigo wouldn't parry the whole thing. But he did, and now Justin has to relive that mistake every day of his life. I'll eventually make a full video on just exactly how archetype strength is defined, since what a win condition is and what makes a win condition strong is something that requires a lot more explanation than I can easily do in this video, so you can look forward to a future what makes an archetype top tier video too. But before I get to making that video, I want to look at these other two bullet points in greater detail, since while they might look simple on the surface, they can be quite difficult to understand and unintuitive. So let's look at what largely is deemed as a failed character. Sub-Zero in Mortal Kombat 1. Just to be clear, not only are archetypes a bit messy in NetherRealm games since they play very differently to traditional 2D fighters, but their assists, or cameos as they're known in this game, can largely muddy the idea of character strength. New tech is found all the time, and obviously some players are far better than others at both characters and using cameos. But Sub-Zero only really has one win condition: simple high-low mix-ups. If you're very lucky, you can land this hilarious looking move in neutral and explode someone for it. Or, there are some other shenanigans you can do using Ice Clone on the defensive or his armoured slide on the floor for approach, especially when playing online. But for the most part, as the aggressor, Sub isn't a great whiff punisher, nor is his move speed great for introducing strike throw to the mix. Plus, there's some very messed up stuff in this game you can do to make wake up conditions weak in a lot of scenarios. And again, that would be too much to get into for this video. Sub-Zero's best damage comes from his overhead. It's slow, but it's sort of ambiguous. What makes it ambiguous is that his sweep looks really similar on startup. They both create an ice mace. But the problem is, while his overhead leads to a pretty meaty combo easily, sweep leads to, the opponent standing back up. On the down low, if you're a much better player than me, technically you can set his sweep up to combo off of it. But the problem is, this requires setup that's visible, requires you preempting doing a sweep, and then using cameo meter, and it still wouldn't lead up to very much damage. Especially nothing like the overhead, even with this great deal of complications added on. And look, Sub-Zero has other lows and other overheads, but they kind of wind up having a similar, if not the exact same, issue. His backstep is way easier to combo out of for decent damage, but his chopping overhead just has the exact same problem, instantly knocking the opponent down unless you're sinking cameo meter in. There's a very inconsistent level of fear this creates. Not only are his low and overhead fairly reactable since they're further in target combos, but the damage reward of these means that even if you're not reacting properly or guessing correctly, you still wind up essentially rewarded. You wind up completely safe from the more dangerous option. So there's a character who technically has what he needs for his game plan, but it's the inconsistent availability of damage from these sources that flaws him considerably. Let's look at someone with the opposite issue. Good damage that's consistent and a very good archetype, but very low safety, in order to round off this idea. Bedman, is a set play character. A kinda odd one since the things they set up are their own head blowing up, but they're often regarded as a bottom tier in Guilty Gear Strive. Even though every single hit you land can guarantee you the easiest combo of your life, and automatically guarantee you set play and okizeme or pressure on your opponent's wake up. But next to nothing that he can do leaves him positive, and his mix-ups are, well, pretty basic. Again, he's essentially just a high-low character, and if you waste this chance at a high-low, you either need to burn 50 meter to try again, leave yourself negative and against some characters get a guaranteed punish, or in worst case scenario, overcommit entirely and leave yourself negative enough for a max damage combo. This is also pretty rough against characters with things like DPs or invulnerable reversals, since Bedman's set play just turns off completely if Bedman blocks anything. And if you'd like to even attempt a shimmy so that you don't have to block, Bedman is so slow that a backdash would essentially guarantee that you've wasted your okizeme entirely. Bedman's actual damage isn't that notable. It can be good with high investment, but it's pretty much average for this game. Even though his okay damage is guaranteed off of every single hit he lands, his game plan, which is good on paper, just shatters due to this mass fragility to even mediocre defense, and his high meter dependency is purely due to this complete lack of safety. Normally, these kinds of consistent damage, easy to play, free hit confirm characters are everywhere competitively, but Bedman is a rare standout case, where this kind of character has terrible frame data, and he will likely remain a tricky and bizarre quote-unquote technical character forever, even though his game plan is very easy, purely due to his moves being unsafe. So, that's it explained. Well, for the most part. See, there's a final fourth bullet point that I failed to mention on purpose, that makes a character top tier, and that would be system mechanics. Since some characters, like Morrigan in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, might be amazing in her own game, but absolutely terrible if she was in Street Fighter 6. And there's two sides to playing well with system mechanics, utilising them well and countering them well, and funnily enough, this is weirdly an archetype issue. For obvious reasons, projectile zoners become automatically weaker in any game with universal parries, but in a game like Under Night with a universal command dash, projectiles become artificially stronger, snuffing out a universal option every character has for approach. For the most part, playing well with this system mechanics is obvious, but there are some cute far-out edge examples that some people don't tend to think about. For example, a reason Ken is weaker than Luke in Street Fighter V is meter reliance. His damage without EX moves and supers is mediocre. Meanwhile, in Street Fighter 6, Ken will likely always be stronger than Luke for the game's entire lifespan, because his EX moves work much better with his game plan and the game's mechanics, and Ken will effectively start every single round with full meter. His Jinrai kicks are free Okizeme after any knockdown, which can then lead him into a high damage combo or super. Meanwhile, Luke doesn't get very much notable from a low starter, and he has a very boring, not very strong Ryu-esque overhead. Note that I'm not saying that Luke is a bad character by any means, but given Ken is so high on points 1, 2, and 4 in particular, 2 and 3 would need to take an unfathomable hit to send Ken flying down the tier list. In fact, he seems almost perfectly designed to take advantage of everything that Street Fighter 6 mechanically has in particular, basically becoming the game's poster boy for what character strength would look like, until perhaps someone else would come along with a fresh gameplay style with which to rule the roost. To round things off, system mechanics are incredibly broad, and again, I can't really cover anywhere near all of them in this video. Even generic throws have like 10 completely different implementations with wholly different strengths and weaknesses, so maybe there will be something like a Universal Archive series further down the road in order to take a closer look at that sort of thing. And that is entirely on you guys to decide. Right now, as you watch this video, there should be a poll live on both of my supporter pages in order to pick out the very next video, which might be Archetype Archive, Ability Archive, or something entirely different. And for the foreseeable future, I'm running with a new production schedule that will see 2 videos both released publicly at a time, with the first video that's finished going up for supporters until both videos are ready. So if you'd like to have a say in what comes next, see videos before they're live, or see exclusive behind the scenes content, you can support me via my YouTube membership down below, or at patreon.com/darumafgc. At higher tiers, you can even have your name written on screen or get a shout out, like my biggest fan Archetype, supporter number 1. You guys have to pick up the slack. They even get a cool badge on their YouTube comments that you could have too in order to show off your support. Besides that though, and all jokes aside, any and all support that you guys offer is appreciated. So if you enjoy the discussion, or if you learned something, you can like the video and subscribe to my channel for more fighting game discussion. You can even share it to a friend who's just learning fighting games, or that you know will disagree with me and start an argument with you. That's always fun. And that's going to be all for this video, but until next time, as always, I'd like to leave you all by saying, stay safe.